Hi, this is Sang Kim of 4D Motion. Before getting into the instructional portion of the video, first I'd like to just take you through the setup, placement of the sensors, calibration, and then a brief overview of each metrics mean, and then we'll go into the instructional portion. So to get started, first select the profile of the player you want to work with, and then make sure we're on the Modules tab. And in this case, I'm going to take you through the 4-sensor kinematic sequence setup, which is for the hip, chest, lead, upper arm, and the bat. But if you're just using the 1-sensor chest or the 2-sensor hip chest, it's the same process. You just don't have to do the arm and the bat. So first, let's click on the Start button next to the 4-sensor kinematic sequence. Okay, so I have 4 sensors turned on. They're paired to the device. They're charged. They're calibrated. So let's go ahead and hit connect. And again, if you have a 1-sensor chest module, you just have to have 1 sensor on. If you have the 2-sensor hip chest, it's just the 2. Now that they're all connected, you hit next. And at this point, we're going to put the sensors on. Now, each sensor will be specific to a location, so make sure you go through it step by step. So the first is a chest sensor, and one of my sensors has lit blue. So I know this is a sensor I want to put on. So I get my chest strap, and the chest sensor is important. It determines the orientation for the rest of the sensors. So I always want the white side of the chest sensor facing forward. So if you put it on the front, it should be white side out. If you put it on the back, which the chest harness is designed for, you want it blue side facing out or white side facing in. So as you can see, I have my chest harness here. I'm putting it in, and the blue side is facing out, the white side is facing in. Okay? So now when I put this on, the white side will be facing forward. If you happen to do this backwards, you'll know right away because everything will come out backwards, and then you could just do it over. Just make sure it's on snug, and want the sensor kind of right in the center of the back. Okay? So now we'll hit next, and we'll place the hip sensor. Now, you can either use a long strap as a belt, or you can use a clip and clip it on right on the hip. It's pretty much up to you, but if you are going to use the belt, make sure, or if it's their shorts or pants, make sure it's snug. If it's not snug and it's going to move around, then I would recommend using the belt. My belt's pretty snug. And I'm going to put the sensor on off to the side, not directly in front of me because I want the sensors to be able to relatively see each other, on my lead side. And the reason for that is just for connection issues. I'm going to be putting sensors on my lead side, so I want them together. If you're doing a trail arm configuration, I would put the hip sensor on my trail side. So this one lit blue. I'm going to put it on. And for all the rest of the sensors, it's always white side out. So you can see the white side's out. So let's hit next. Okay, now it's time for the user pose calibration. I'm laying the bat down because we don't need to calibrate the bat. So when you're calibrating, there's a couple of important things. First, you want the person standing in the position that they would if they were hitting. So if I'm going to be hitting that way, catchers here, pitchers here, I want to calibrate like this, not like this, and not like this. So essentially on the line, okay? The second important thing is the posture. Per the diagram, we essentially want all the segments to be vertical. We don't want any tilts this way. We don't want any tilts this way. And we don't want any of the joints bent. And we want a neutral spine. So make sure the players have elbows are locked in, palms facing the sides, and we want this arm to be vertical with respect to the ground. So you just have to hold this position, press the next button. So the player just has to hold that position between the 2 beeps. I think the countdown is set at 3 seconds by default. You can set it to 1 because you're going to be there. The purpose of the countdown is if you're performing this by yourself and you need to hit the button, give yourself time to put yourself in the pose, you could set it for like 5 seconds or whatever. So now that we're fully calibrated, and by the way, you only have to calibrate once per session. You don't have to do it every time. The only need to recalibrate is if you're changing the target line or if the person moved the sensor and you feel like you need to recalibrate them. But essentially, at this point, we're ready to go. So let's go ahead and hit next. So at this point, there's really only a couple options here. One is the countdown time. Again, I'd set that to 1 if you're working with the player. If you're working by yourself, maybe you need to set to 5 seconds. And then the second is the recording time. Anywhere between 3 to 5 seconds is typically enough for the swing. So what you want to do is just have your player get ready, again, on the line. And when they hear that beep, you want to go ahead and swing. So just going to take a nice, easy swing. Go ahead. So let's take a quick look at the metrics page for the 2-sensor hitting kinematic sequence module. And on the upper right is the transition sequence. So this is the sequence in which the hips and chest start turning towards the pitcher. Okay, so optimal is hip chest. If it's chest hip, the chest is lead going ahead, which is inefficient and not benefiting from the drive of the legs and the hips. The deceleration sequence can also be referred to as the peak sequence. So this is the sequence in which the hip and the chest reach their maximum velocity. And again, we want to see the order of the hip and the chest because we want the hip to decelerate in order to transfer energy to the chest. Underneath that, we give you the absolute peak rotational speeds. So these are the angular velocity or the peak rotational speeds of the hip and the chest. Now these will vary by the age and strength and level of the player. But what we're looking for is general improvement. We want faster hips benefiting from leveraging the ground properly, and then we want to transfer energy into the chest. And then the chest speed correlates very highly with the bat speed. So the bottom portion is the peak rotational speed gain. So simply put, it's the speed gain from the hips to the chest, or what percent faster is the chest moving than the hips or pelvis. And we want to see a number, preferably at least 30, 40 would be ideal, because it represents a good sequence, good timing, enough separation, so that they can take all the power that they're getting from their legs, translate it into the chest, and then ultimately into the bat. So when you select the show statistics, we allow you to set the date range on the top, and then you could start to see the trends. So the sequence stuff will give you percentages, what sequence for both transition, deceleration, do you do most of the time by percentages, and then on the bottom of the screen, we'll show you the running numbers for every one that you did. And then if you see one from the list that you want to particularly review, you can just click on that, and then it'll take you to that particular one. And if you want to go back to statistics, you just click Show Statistics on the bottom of the screen. Okay, well, hope that was useful. Stay tuned for the instructional part of the video. Thank you.
Hey guys, Rick Strickland here from Rick Strickland Baseball Training with RSP and 4D Motion. Coming with some instructional stuff here on the 2-sensor kinetic sequence module. Basically, in the 2-sensor kinetic sequence module, we really focus on two of the biggest contributors to the swing. And the first one would be the pelvis, right here, the hips. The upper body would be the trunk, chest. I would say the pelvis and the hips' primary function is really to transfer force up from the ground up through the body here. So we're going to work really quickly on showing how we actually train it. And then we'll talk about the trunk as being the conduit for turning this ground force reaction energy into rotational acceleration and velocity. A lot of times we see guys who have unstable trunks who actually will lift their back hip off the ground quickly this way, that won't have good ground mechanics here. You'll see that the chest to trunk will actually start to accelerate before the pelvis has actually done a really good job of taking that energy from the ground and having the opportunity to pass it to the trunk. So basically, it's a two-sensor unit. And then for this instruction, we're going to talk a little about isolating the pelvis. You're going to activate it early and then work on the trunk. And you can do a variety of different things, however way you want to create this. But just for the simplicity of this video, I'm just going to show you what we do here. Really, we'd like to use a bigger ball, and you can make, doesn't have to be too big, but we want one that's big enough that actually would mimic where the stride foot would land. So go ahead and straddle that. All right. All right. And so I'd have the guy relax a little bit. All right. And so relax. And then when you're ready to go, you're going to squeeze and then swing. Go ahead. Go. All right. Squeeze the ball. Both knees together. Yeah. Go. Squeeze. Good. Squeeze. Good. And what should happen from this is once you start to do that, because the pelvis and the legs are activated by squeezing the ball, now the trunk can work off of the hip actually engaging with the ground, creating ground force reaction. All right. So one of the other ways we'll like to do this is we'll take the back heel, we'll lift it in the air, all right? And I'll have the guy make sure we're in good posture position, slam the heel on the ground, squeeze, and then swing. Go. Good. Now, that's a different feel, right, Josh? Because at that point in time, when you slam the heel, the back glute, he actually feels his back glute actually fire, right? But what we're doing is we're trying to create the sequence, right? Turn on the lower half, then turn on the upper body, all right? Here we go. Go. Good. All right, we always want to work with a stable spine. In the chest monitor, we talk a lot about stable spine. But anytime we're doing anything as in a striking sport or anything in general, we want to be able to rotate effectively. All right, so he's going to slam the foot on the ground, bam, pull that elbow down so that the rib cage can do what? Fuse itself to the pelvis and go. Do it again. All right, elbow sweep. So you see this a lot with hitters where they get this scapula so locked up high, it's hard for them to get it down. So one of the things as he rotates, he wants to be able to take the bone of this and push it into his rib cage while he's rotating. All right, he's a middle infielder by nature, so he does it all the time when he's messing around throwing double play throws. We just need to add it to the bat so that he can rotate around his spine. All right, so slam the heel on the ground and go. Good. All right, this is what this will look like with the regular swing. We leave the ball here. All right, all right, start with the heel up. All right, slam and pull. When you slam, the elbow should come down too, right? We want to create this pinching action on the trail side here. Good. All right, so we've got him calibrated. We're ready to go. We want to see how he performs this drill here. See if he'll get this in order. Ready? Go. In this drill, you're going to see a lot less hip rotational speeds, but we're not really trying to train that right now, right? What we're trying to train is the kinetic energy from the pelvis to the trunk. We want the pelvis, the trunk to be able to grab um, the pelvis and be able to propel itself forward. So we look at this and we look at hip is the transition is hip chest, which is a metric. The transition is basically the order of which these two joints actually turn to the pitch. So the pelvis would be one, the chest would be two. As we do this, we want them to turn in that order towards the pitch, one and two. There's also a deceleration factor going on as well. What order do they actually start to slow down? We can think about two runners, a relay race, basically. You're running, all of a sudden, you got the baton, you stick it out, and the other runner, the trail runner, actually gets propelled before you. And that's exactly what's happening in this two-sensor thing here. The third metric we have on here is called peak rotational acceleration. I'm more concerned at this point in time in how much power, how much kinetic energy are we transferring from the pelvis to the actual trunk here. And in that first test swing, Josh was about 52%. The range that's excellent is somewhere between 40 and 60, right? So you try it again, all right? And then we'll try one without, okay? 3, 2, squeeze the ball, go. Good. But really all we're trying to do is train the two big contributors to the first two contributors of the swing. All right, we did that again. And hip chest, he nailed it both times. Energy transfer was 40%. So now we're going to see, how well does this athlete do it without any type of constraint. All right, all right. So one of the ways we will do this one off here is that we're going to start with the back heel up. All right, just give him a cue. Well, this is going to be a constraint because we have the back heel up. So we're going to have back heel up. We're going to have him slam it, and then as you slam it, Josh, try to connect the rib cage to the pelvis and go. 3, 2, go. All right, and so we're still looking for that 40 to 60%. We're looking for these two to work themselves in order on the transition and the deceleration, have good rotational acceleration and good kinetic energy. We nailed it. Hip chest, hip chest. One area of that swing we didn't do very well at is we only had 26% of the energy going from the pelvis to the trunk. Okay, try it again. We may not get it here, but that's how we work it. So you see that the stability ball actually contribute a lot more to the kinetic energy from the pelvis to the trunk. So Josh obviously needs some ground work so that he can use his chest in the kinetic sequence. So I'm gonna give him a little cue. So when you land here, I want you to go ahead and create a little tension in the trail trunk. All right. When you were doing the stability ball, what was happening here? You were actually squeezing, activating both legs, right? Let's try that for this swing. 3, 2, go. Hip chest, went up a little bit, right? 30% there. So we know that this is a drill that for Josh to take this home and work on the stability drill so he can learn how to make these two things coordinate much better. So those are the first two parts of the kinetic sequence that we look at. With the module, what we're looking at basically is how can we train the pelvis and the chest to work in order from a transition to a deceleration to proper energy transfer between both of these joints.